Afghanistan has triggered off global realignments. Everyone is talking to the other, but China seems to be making its way up surely and steadily. The US, in a bid to break new footing in a region that it has destroyed for itself, has put together a Middle East Quad. The Biden administration is now working on AUKUS with the old Quad, of which India remains a member, looking at vaccinations and climate change. China, however, does not seem to be interested in joining the jostling for space and is busy knitting commerce with strategy. It has acquired a heavy footprint in Afghanistan as well as in South Asia, where it has excellent relations with all of India's neighbors. Its policy for India borders the hostile, with incursions and skirmishes continuing to mar border claims. The situation is fluid, but yet crystallizing on a very different trajectory than before, with the Taliban in command in Afghanistan and Iran, Turkey, and Pakistan becoming more dominant. Welcome to Off Limits, everyone. Our guest this week is former Ambassador M.K. Bhadrakumar, who's retired from the Indian Foreign Service. He has served as ambassador at many stations, and he's a prolific writer, keeping a very close watch on world developments, and particularly these days on Afghanistan. So we're very, very happy to have you with us, Ambassador. And let's start with what you have written so much on is Afghanistan, and the fact that the American exit from Afghanistan has invited, or seems to have invited and set about a new alignment or realignment of regional players, including China, Pakistan, of course, because of Afghanistan, but Russia, Iran, Turkey. So how do you see this panning out?
Well, first of all, thank you, Seema, for inviting me to this. It's an honor, because you're a very prestigious editor, and your interviewing me is a great privilege for me. Thank you. Let me mention first of all that on the 15th, the Inspector General of the U.S. administration of the State Department has sent a memo for action to Blinken. We don't have a system like this. They have an Inspector General who is autonomous, genuinely autonomous. And this is a lady who's the acting Inspector General. And they are only answerable to the Congress. This must be understood very clearly. So, it's not a bureaucrat. Yeah. So they sent a memo saying that she has told the Congress that she is going to conduct a thorough inquiry into what really happened.
Right.
You have seen these congressional hearings and so on. That the administration was on the back foot, and the open bickerings between State Department and Pentagon and so on. So, at the present moment, I bring this in only to highlight the point that at the present point in time, the Americans are still not got their act together. That is one thing. And then the second template there is that, that they had a plan B, so to speak, in terms of so-called out of the region operations in Afghanistan, that they would operate from, they have the technical means to do that. Now, that has turned out to be delusional in the sense that, that they've been shut out of almost the entire arc of countries surrounding Afghanistan. Pakistan, most importantly, has put its foot down. Imran Khan said that he wouldn't commit that mistake again, very categorically. And that has actually even shaken the relationship to some extent, but Pakistan is willing to stick out for that, that it's not only a matter of principle, but it's a matter of existential considerations. So you see, and then China and Russia work together, and they have brought the Central Asians together onto a platform to say that there will be, and the Central Asians are also quite uneasy about the larger American intentions. So you see, now that is the third template, the American intentions. The American intention is very clearly that, even at Doha, it was that they were going to withdraw the troops, but they were going to have an open-ended presence nonetheless in Afghanistan. and that their assumption was that the Taliban could be persuaded or cajoled or pressured to agree to that. Now, that turned out to be a completely wrong notion. The Taliban said that there is no scope for a compromise on the question of foreign occupation of their country, and they want to retrieve the national sovereignty very comprehensively, and they will never allow another foreign military presence in their country. So you see, that is where the clash came, and then the Taliban pushed on the military side, and then the rest, I don't need to describe that. So you see, the Americans have been caught there also on the wrong foot. The out-of-area operations is not possible. And nonetheless, they have a geopolitical agenda, which has always been there. All these 15, 20 years, it was lying submerged, but it has come to the fore, and particularly now with this rivalry with Russia and China. And although even Iran, then I assume that the nuclear agreement will work out, the negotiations will work out, for the simple reason that the Americans have no alternative but to get Iran back into the JCPOA. And Iran has made it conditional that that the sanction must be withdrawn. So that is coming, and therefore we are also going to see a very new Iran, like we have not seen,
Yeah.
So you see, these are all factors, which are playing out in terms of the alignment that you have mentioned. Now, the alignments are clearly this way, that, that all these countries, whether it is Iran, for instance, is a constituency within Afghanistan, and that is their number one consideration, is the Hazara community, the Tajik cultural affiliations, and all that historically, civilizationally. So you see, China, when it comes to Xinjiang, Russia, when it comes to Central Asia stability, and also North Caucasus, and Pakistan in terms of its entire internal dynamic, that they cannot afford to have insecurity and instability in Afghanistan because it will spill over into their country. So they have become the number one stakeholder in stabilizing the Afghan situation. So all these countries have got, I don't think the Indian paranoia about, that the Indians are going to get worked up over this and there's going to be a radicalization in the country. I don't think, or that Al-Qaeda is going to pour into India and all that. I think this has been said many times before, and I think it's for other factors. But objectively, I don't think that there is going to be any kind of a fallout from Afghanistan directly into India.
So we are also looking at, if we are talking of India, I'll stay with India for a while. Because there is obviously this, there seems to be a certain confusion as to where do you go, because the Americans are one factor and we are very much on that same card. But whether that's the right way to go about in Afghanistan and the region is obviously some kind of rethinking maybe happening in the Indian Foreign Office, or trying to expand the basket or the bouquet, as it were. With the talks with Pakistan now on the horizon and some reaching out to the Taliban, how does that work for us?
The sensible thing to do is exactly what you hinted at, in the sense that, that we, of course, there's no gainsaying the fact today that our assumptions have gone completely awry in Afghanistan. And our influence in Afghanistan, our capacity to influence the events in Afghanistan, all those things have turned out to be delusional. And we are not going to get this Quad and all this kind of platforms to be of any help for us in Afghanistan. So we are on our own, and that is the problem here. And at the same time, this hitchhiking with America in terms of the Indo-Pacific strategy, that has become a very obsessive thought in the Indian strategic calculus, So you see, from that point of view, that you cannot dealing from the Americans. You have to go with them. And now that you are midstream, you just keep going, And that has become a really obsessive factor in the Indian foreign policy. And it is distorting, in fact, a number of areas, the repercussions are very negative. So otherwise, the situation today is that, because of what I mentioned in the beginning, the predicament of the Americans, the regional initiative for the first time is crystallizing. Now, for example, Pakistan and the other neighboring countries, Pakistan took the initiative to get all the other neighboring countries to have a foreign minister level forum created, which is a high powered one, and which can make decisions. And because Pakistan is adamant, and Imran Khan has said it in many interviews, and I think it is a very, very wise decision that they have taken, that they shall not take any unilateral move vis-a-vis the Afghan situation, and that they will travel with a regional consensus on it. This is a very mature thinking, and they don't want a replay of the 1990s, because I don't want to get into the other aspects of it, of Pakistan's emphasis on geoeconomics and all that. But these are all at work here, and that forum has gained traction. And Iran has, Iran was actually staying out of these regional initiatives to a great extent up till then. Iran has moved into it, and Iran told that foreign ministers meeting at the next one, Iran would like to have the privilege of hosting. And not only that, the first one was a virtual meeting, but next Wednesday, today is Wednesday, the next, exactly 1 week later, there is going to be a foreign ministers meeting, and Iran has said that they are trying to put it together as a real meeting, in-person meeting, so that they can have very detailed discussions, foreign ministers of this one. And that, as an exception, they are also including Russia into it.
Do you?
Yeah. So you see the regional initiative, which has always been, the preferred vehicle for a crisis like in Afghanistan all along, even through these 20 years, there's no requirement for a Western occupation of that country. Now that is crystallizing. So in terms of the alignment and so on, that is going to be the centerpiece of it. And India, when it comes to that, India is standing out of it. So we are like a lone ranger, So come back to the thing. We are facing the specter that is haunting us is that we are being left stranded in the railway station. The train is moving, and this is the last train everyone knows that is moving. This conference taking place in Moscow and so on, which is really a turning point. I can tell you that. We are all on a wrong track here, because we've been demonizing the Taliban, speaking about this inclusion of women and all the rest of it and all that, and we lost the plot completely, and now, the thing is to get back into it, we need to have really, new thinking into this, pragmatic.
There is this, one thing about the Taliban, but then Afghanistan, there have been a lot of reports across the world also about other fundamentalist groups using it as a playing field, which is the ISIS or Al-Qaeda or whatever in Afghanistan. That's one. And the second part of the question, do you see some kind of a linkage between the recent attacks on minorities, say like the Shias in Afghanistan, the Hindus and the Sikhs in Kashmir, the Hindus in Bangladesh? I mean, suddenly all of this has come in a fairly larger way in the region again, where the minorities are now being targeted.
I have absolutely no doubt about the fact that the ISIS, its core, is a creation of the Americans. Right from the time that, Hamid Karzai started talking about it, that in the night, unmarked helicopters were dropping people in far-flung areas of Afghanistan. And at that time, the airspace was completely under the control of the NATO and the Americans. So no fly could, move around like that, and helicopters were dropping people. So it's very clear. Your question is very important because the Iranians have spoken openly about it. And now Russians have also, I'm sure on the basis of intelligence inputs, they have also concluded that there is a concerted strategy, in fact, to create Sunni, Shia, Iran-Pakistan, Iran-Taliban kind of tensions, The game is really speaking to destabilize the Taliban government there, because anarchical conditions are what exactly the Americans want. In which case, like in Syria, they can occupy certain pockets of that country from where they can operate. And the Russians have said that, Putin has said that, and it must be very authoritative, therefore, last week in a speech, that in their estimation, there are 2,000 Islamic State fighters who've been congregating in northern Afghanistan. You know, because the American target is actually towards Central Asia, China, Russia, Iran, you know, so it's not really in the Pashtun areas, but it is taking place. So therefore, you know, this conflict that is taking place, and it's very strange what is that this has happened in Jammu and Kashmir. I really don't know, you know, who's doing this. It's very, I don't want to get into conspiracy theories, but, you know, it's very disturbing and it is very intriguing, really speaking, what is happening. But this intriguing part is getting better understood in Afghanistan. So I would surmise that all kinds of forces are at work in the region to prevent, you know, a regional initiative. And, you know, an unseen hand here is all this Britain, you know. Britain always has been the brainwave, you know, behind the Americans, and they have their colonial past, and now this huge ambition that they must regain their place in the sun again, the global Britain concept, you know, because they are terrified that from a second tier power, they are going to move to a third tier power, and they don't want that to happen. So they are sending their aircraft carriers to this region, and they are coming east of Suez, because Asia is the region which is creating wealth, and they must have a slice of it. So Britain is also very much in this.
Part of it.
Yeah.
So to come now really to China and the fact that Afghanistan has been a good opportunity for it to expand its regional footprint in this whole area. Now in South Asia, you find them with increasing influence in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka, in Nepal, now Afghanistan. Now it's, you know, its movement towards the Belt and Road Initiative, which will move probably faster. Of course, they've always linked their geostrategic designs to the economic designs, aims and ambitions, not designs. And at the same time, you have them at our borders, right? And you have them at Ladakh. Now they've entered Uttarakhand. So China is obviously emerging as a major regional power, always was, but it's now all seems to be coming together for it, right?
You know, India-China relations and China's general attitude to the world situation are not comparable. India, you know, India-China has its. I have believed that, you know, that all these happenings on the border started from Doklam, you know, because you know what we did in 2017 is actually to cross into Chinese territory on a part of the border that was settled. There was no dispute there. Now it's a very major thing that we did to cross over to Chinese territory and you know, just move, you know, as if we couldn't care less. Now I don't know what considerations, you know, we had. Now we know for a fact that Bhutan is not saying eye to eye with us. You know, it's quite clear from the latest developments. So, you know, that provocation in 2017, and then in 2019, we compounded that with the revocation of, by revoking the special status of J&K. And then, you know, 3 months thereafter, you know, issuing a new map of India, showing, you know, Aksai Chin, etc., as part of Tibet and part of huge tracts of Tibet, what the Chinese call their territory, as part of Indian territory. Now, 5 months later, probably, you know, the Chinese moved into the areas, you know, those areas in Ladakh and all these places, all across the border, we suddenly found, you know, that stirrings taking place. So you see the India-China thing, they had actually bought into the Wuhan spirit. You know, it was that it was genuine. That I think was the Chinese understanding. Prime Minister's visit, overnight visit to Wuhan, and you know, long sessions alone with Xi Jinping and so on. And then this all happened like this, and you know, the Ladakh situation and all that, Kashmir and all this, and you know, we refused to discuss also with them. We said that this is purely our internal matter. You know, that kind of an attitude we cannot take, because we cannot deny the fact that there is a dispute. And a dispute, when there is a dispute, there are two parties to it. And we can't say that, no, you are not part of it. We can't say that. So we should have actually discussed this at that point. In fact, we should have discussed this, but we went on the track. And now things have come to a pass. From the Chinese commentaries, I am seeing that, that they have concluded that India is under the impression that by traveling along with the Americans and their Indo-Pacific strategy, etc., and the Chinese are concluding that, that all India has taken very hostile attitudes wherever it can, starting from COVID-19 virus, down the line on any issue concerning China. We are taking this, and as I mentioned, that this is an obsessive thought Indian foreign policy, and the Chinese know it. So you see, their behavior in the South Asian region is largely conditioned by that. Now, I don't think that, if you go to the previous history, I don't think their behavior in Nepal or China or Sri Lanka or somewhere, Bangladesh or somewhere, had any animus against India. They were actually expanding, deepening their influence in this region in terms of the pursuit of their own interests, national interests, but it was not it's not an India-centric policy. It is even today not really an India-centric policy, but I agree with you that that there is a certain animus, and so I think their writings say that that India should realize that the Americans can't help it, that these are issues which we have to deal ourselves, and China will not be cowered down by this, that since the Americans are friends of India, India can do what it likes, so that China should concede, compromise. This theme keeps coming in their writings, I find. So that's where it is, and I don't think that this is sustainable from the Indian side, this thing, because the objective reality is, that we have a disconnect here today between foreign policy and the domestic situation. The domestic situation is so bad, not only the political polarization, but a failing economy, all this, and we are putting gloss over it, but the reality we all know is, we are not getting anywhere. So how is this going to be sustainable? This sort of a thing, like, we are antagonizing Russia as part of it, because Indo-Pacific strategy is not only about China, it is also about Russia. India is having a 15-day exercise in Alaska at the moment. Why Alaska? Because Alaska has been now determined to be the strategic hub of the containment strategy against Russia and China. That is the Arctic area and the South China Sea area. Now, what is our business in getting entangled in this? I really do not know, So you see, we are on a trip, for which is going to be very costly for us as time passes.
Because there is this increasing isolation.
We are completely isolated now. And, so China is, on the other hand, China is also doing very constructive things in the region. Like I was reading this bridge over the river, near Dhaka, that several kilometers long, 6 kilometers, something long bridge. Now that is going to be commissioned in June next year, and Seema is going to. So we really have everything is in a shambles as far as I can see, and there's no point in just blaming China. That we don't have any kind of interest in it. Look at this, that you can't see anything in isolation. Look at this, what Foreign Minister has done. He went to Iran repeatedly, 2 times or 3 times, met President Raisi even before his assumption of office and all that. Now he has gone along with Blinken and the Israeli and UAE foreign ministers to form a West Asian Quad. No, I really don't know.
What is this Quad? How is this Quad going to? How are the other countries going to react to this Quad? And is it going to have teeth? Because obviously it would if the Americans are really pushing it in the Middle East.
Yes, the Americans are pushing it because, this point is this Israel and Americans, they are like headless chicken today, in that region. That there are so many things happening. And it is quite evident that the region can manage its own affairs, like I mentioned about Afghanistan and the regional initiative. Saudi is Iranian normalization. Iran's axis with Russia, China, and Russia, China on the horizon in the Gulf region in a major way, and estrangement between Saudi Arabia and the United States. So, United States is in a situation that with the two most important countries in the Muslim Middle East, that is Iran, no, actually with three, you should also include Turkey in it.
Yes,
and
of course.
these three countries, the most important and the most powerful three countries, Americans today don't have a relationship. So you can imagine, that what kind of a presence they have. So they're trying to get embedded in the region because they also have to focus on Indo-Pacific. And we are not at all in India watching the tensions building up in Eurasia. Russia has told the NATO office to be shut down in Moscow, and they are shutting down in Brussels and saying, get lost, So you see the tensions building up there because the Americans are pushing NATO expansion again into Georgia, Ukraine, etc. After that, only the Russians reacted like this, all this last week, So you see, we don't have a coherent picture in this.
So in this whole thing, almost now to the last question or two, this debate between this, or the projected rivalry between Quad and AUKUS, is this all a false debate? Because it does seem that after this great build-up to Quad, now all it does is vaccination and climate change. And the strategy seems to have gone to AUKUS, because that's obviously Biden and the new president's baby. So India's again out of the loop?
AUKUS is an absolute joke, in the sense that the Americans take somewhere between 1 to 5 years to make a nuclear submarine, And, it's not an easy thing to do. It's a technology of the highest order, And Russian nuclear submarines are there in the Pacific area. And no one knows where China is really today, how many it has and how many it is building, etc. So a reasonable expectation is that it will be somewhere around 2040 that Australia may get this nuclear submarines. 2040 is a very long time in the politics of China, the way things are going now, hypersonic and all this kind of stuff. So I don't think it is going to be tilting the balance in a decisive way in the region. Americans are, what they're again trying to do is they're trying to get embedded in the region because the ASEAN has spurned their overtures. ASEAN has said very clearly that, that they cannot afford to take sides because the Chinese market is a locomotive of growth for the ASEAN economies. And ASEAN is a very huge trade volume they have built up with China now. So they cannot afford to do that. And Americans are, coming and going. Then there is a big credibility question, that who knows what will happen in 2024, whether Biden would be around and what this administration says its shelf life, how much is it going to be. Nobody knows, So, so Australia, Britain, United States, they formed a core group. That's what has happened there. Because within the Quad, credit must be given to the Indians also in this, that, Indian government also, that, that we refuse to let Quad be loaded with military stuff, Militarization of Quad is something we didn't agree with. So, as you said, Quad is a platform with all kinds of innocent activities, like vaccine production.
Last resolution was only about all that, so there was no strategy really there except in one line or something.
The Middle East Quad is not going to be any different, by the way. It's going to be
it doesn't have the regular players anyway there. It's got all the very suspects there from the Middle East. The last question that I want to ask you is that you seem to suggest, and if you take everything that you've said in a nutshell about India particularly, is that we need to rewrite and reorient our foreign policy to become a player in the region. But given the fact that we've signed so many agreements now, which really completely embroil us in the American strategy or policies, is it possible at all now for India to sort of extricate itself from this total control by the Americans, or this understanding, if you want to put a better word, with the Americans, and move into the region as a strong and yet friendly, committed to peace neighbor?
There are certain fundamental contradictions, that let's not put all the blame on the Americans. For example, I must highlight the fact which you highlighted at the beginning, is that, this upcoming conference on Afghanistan could be turned around, in fact, in this direction, to reset the relationship with the regional states on the whole, particularly with Pakistan and China. But what worries me is that this contradiction, that normalization with Pakistan by this government, is it conceivable? Because if you go to the social sites, for instance, here, the social media, you will find the mood of the core constituency. And you have the election cycles beginning. So my worry, in fact, I wrote this also yesterday. My worry is that, that whatever we are doing maybe for the optics, like, last time, you saw an election debate completely getting hijacked in terms of Balakot and so on. So you see, we are entering a very uncertain period now with this election cycle, because the government has also nothing much to show. And then, all these things can be brought in and distorted in a certain way. And we purpose, phobia, all these kind of things can happen, Otherwise, what is possible is that, we should have, making use of the Afghan situation, we should work for a moratorium. I say moratorium deliberately on cross-border terrorism, because Pakistan also has concerns. And Pakistan's comfort level is higher now, because the clique which was there in Kabul and was working with India, they have all disappeared. And there is no question of their return back to power in there. So I think a window of opportunity is existing. And I generally have always felt that Imran Khan was genuinely interested in having a relationship with India, because in terms of Pakistan's requirement also, it is necessary. So rhetoric all aside, it is possible. But if it takes place, then it is completely undercutting a number of things that we are doing in domestic politics, So I don't know how that can happen. So, and this is not anything that Americans have created. This is something because of what we are, And in the case of China also, it is the same thing, this nationalistic fervor. So if you look at it, in more than the government, even the Sangparivar leaders, are talking about, putting China in its place and all that. And the rank and file, the camp followers, the fellow travelers, and they are all bought into this, So one day, how can you say that, no, look, we need to talk and sort this out? We cannot do that. No leadership can do that in the country. And the opposition is not going to allow the government, which is riding a tiger, to step down also, because see, even on Bhutan, Rahul Gandhi has said very strongly that you have turned friends into enemies. This kind of things are very combustible rhetoric, in an election time, for example.
Right. So even the intent, we are not even sure that we want to change course at the moment. Well, thank you so much for giving us your time. It was very informative as always. And at the end of it, I stand educated. Thank you so much, Ambassador. Ambassador Bhadrakumar actually highlighted the fact that India will have to reduce her isolation by a sort of a turnaround in policy where she takes a keener and more active interest in regional matters along with the regional players, and not against them or despite them. But whether that can happen on the eve of several elections that the country, different states are going to face, is a big question. The fact does remain that China is expanding its footprint, its regional footprint through Afghanistan. It's very present in the countries around India, particularly Sri Lanka and Bangladesh and Nepal. It has a say now, a major say in Afghanistan. It is mended ties with Iran. It is in touch with Turkey. It is very much in West Asia, probably one of the reasons why the Americans have started this Middle East Quad, as they call it, along with Israel, India, and Saudi Arabia as a partner. So we are again poised at the edge, really, of events and new alignments that are taking place. These are crystallizing, they are consolidating, and they will have an impact on our part of the world. What way, which way, how India is going to plan its own trajectory, time will tell. Thank you.